Welcome back to English with Tom and Julia, the podcast where we help you learn English, not by studying harder, but by learning smarter.
Exactly. Every week, we share practical ways to make English part of your life, so it feels natural, not stressful.
Today's topic is something every English learner struggles with: remembering words. You know that feeling? You learn a new word, you feel proud, and 2 days later, it's completely gone.
Yeah, it disappears like a ghost word. So today, we're going to talk about the easiest way to remember English words forever, without flashcards, memorizing lists, or forcing your brain. Let's start with this. Forgetting isn't a failure. It's not a sign that you're bad at English or lazy. It's actually just how your brain works.
Yes, our brains are designed to forget things that don't feel important. It's a kind of mental cleaning system. Every day, your brain receives thousands of pieces of information: words, faces, songs, messages, and it has to decide what to keep.
Exactly. And it keeps what feels useful, emotional, or meaningful. So if you learn a word like comprehensive from a list, your brain might say, I don't really see why we need this right now. And then, delete.
That's true. But if you learn the word pizza, you'll never forget it, because your brain connects it with taste, smell, memories. Maybe that moment you shared pizza with your friends.
Right. So the difference isn't in your memory ability, it's in your emotional connection. When something feels real, the brain says, okay, this matters. Let's save it.
Think about your favorite movie lines or lyrics. You didn't study them, right? You remembered them because they made you feel something. That's how memory works. It's emotional, not mechanical.
I remember when one of my students told me, Tom, I've been learning English for 5 years, but every time I see new words, they just vanish. And I asked her, do you use them? She said, no, I just read and move on. And that's the point. Reading and memorizing are not enough.
Exactly. When you learn words like a robot, your brain doesn't feel involved. It's like you're sending an email to yourself, but you never click send.
That's a great metaphor. So if you've ever felt frustrated, like, why can't I remember words even after studying them again and again? The answer is simple. You're not connecting the words to your world yet.
Yes, and that's what we're going to fix today. Because remembering English words isn't about forcing your brain. It's about teaching your brain to care.
Once your brain cares, it remembers naturally. So in the next part, we'll talk about why the old way of memorizing doesn't work, and how you can start learning in a way your brain actually loves.
Let me tell you a little story. When I first started learning Spanish, I was obsessed with vocabulary lists. I had this beautiful notebook, color-coded, highlighted, full of 50 new words every week.
50? That's ambitious.
Oh, totally. I felt like a genius for the first few days. But then, test day came, and my mind went completely blank. All I could remember was how pretty my notebook looked.
I can relate. I did the same when I was learning French. I spent hours writing and rewriting words, thinking repetition alone would make them stick. But it didn't. It was like pouring water into a bucket with holes.
Exactly. Because that's what happens when we memorize words without meaning. You repeat, 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 but you never use them. So your brain says, okay, this is just noise, and quietly deletes it overnight.
You know what it feels like? Like trying to remember random numbers. If I tell you 35, 72, 14, 89, you'll forget it in seconds. But if I say 72 is your grandma's birthday, you'll remember it forever.
That's so true. When I realized that, I stopped forcing myself to memorize lists. Instead, I started focusing on moments. For example, if I wanted to learn the Spanish word for hungry, I'd wait until I actually felt hungry and say it out loud. Tengo hambre.
That's brilliant. You tied the word to a real emotion, a real situation. That's what makes it stick.
Yes, and that's when I discovered something powerful. It's not about how many words you study. It's about how deeply you connect with them.
We all grow up thinking that learning means memorizing, repeating until it stays. But language doesn't work like that. Language lives in experiences, not in lists.
So if your method of learning feels like studying for an exam, it probably won't last. But if it feels like living with the words, you'll remember them naturally.
And the good news? There's a much easier way to do that. One that doesn't require stress or endless repetition.
Yes. In the next part, we'll talk about how your brain actually remembers things.
Here's where it gets interesting. Your brain remembers things that have emotion or visuals. It's called association memory.
Yes. For example, if you want to remember the word breeze, imagine standing by the sea, feeling that soft wind on your face. That image becomes your memory hook.
I do the same. When I learned the Japanese word for mountain, I imagined climbing one with my friends. That picture in my head made it unforgettable.
So the trick is simple. Don't just learn the word. Connect it with a feeling, a sound, a picture, or a memory.
The stronger the connection, the longer the memory lasts. That's why kids remember new words so easily. They connect everything with play, sound, and emotion.
Here's another secret. Never learn a word alone. Always learn it in context.
Right. For example, instead of learning the word solution, learn it as part of a sentence. Like, I finally found a solution to my problem.
Because when you see a word inside a real situation, your brain says, oh, this is useful. And useful things stay.
That's why learning through stories, songs, or conversations works better than memorizing lists. Your brain learns patterns, not individual pieces.
So if you want to remember a word, don't study it 10 times. Use it once in real life. Write it, say it, type it in a message, even talk to yourself with it.
Let's make this practical. Here's what I do with my students. Every day, choose just 3 new words. Use them in a voice note, journal, or short chat.
That's perfect, because when you use a word in your own sentence, your brain says, oh, this belongs to me. That's ownership memory.
Exactly. Don't worry about remembering 1,000 words. Remember 3 well. Repeat that for a year, and you'll have real fluency.
And remember, it's not about studying harder. It's about studying smarter. You know, I think there's one more secret. Love the words you learn. If you learn gratitude, feel it. If you learn hope, think of something that gives you hope.
That's beautiful. Because language isn't just information, it's emotion. And emotion is what makes memories last forever.
Yes, the easiest way to remember English words is to make them part of your life, not your notebook.
So, let's summarize the magic formula. First, don't memorize, connect. Second, learn in context, not isolation. Third, use emotion and imagery. Last, practice small but daily.
If you do that, you'll never forget another word again. English will stop feeling like a test and start feeling like a language you live in.
And that's what we want for you. Confidence, not perfection.
Thank you for joining us today on English with Tom and Julia. If you found this episode helpful, share it with a friend who's also learning English. And remember, the words you love will always stay with you.
We'll see you in the next episode. Until then, keep learning, keep smiling, and keep speaking English every day.
Bye for now.